Donald Trump did a press conference at Mar-A-Lago to respond to the big Supreme Court case, oral arguments being heard this morning on the case, of course, deciding whether or not he will be on the ballot in the state of Colorado. And it does seem, based on how things went today, that the very conservative Supreme Court will knock down the Colorado Supreme Court's decision and keep Trump on the ballot, but we'll see how it plays out. And Trump's press conference on this subject immediately went off the rails with him saying this.
I heard and I watched, and the one thing I'll say is they kept saying about what I said right after the insurrection. Because I think it was an insurrection caused by Nancy Pelosi.
Now, of course, that's absolutely delusional and insane. But I also thought, wasn't it Nikki Haley that he was recently saying was to blame?
Nikki Haley is in charge of security. We offered her 10,000 people.
But that also contradicts the argument his lawyers were making in court today. His lawyers were arguing what took place on January 6th was not an insurrection. But Trump is saying it was an insurrection. It was just Nancy Pelosi's fault. So publicly contradicting his own lawyers with an insane conspiracy theory. A lot packed into that. My goodness. Then you have this moment.
With the weaponization of politics, they weaponized it like it's never been weaponized before. It's totally illegal, but they do it anyway. And it has to stop. Every one of the court cases that I'm involved, every single one, civil, whether it's the attorney generals or the district attorneys, you look at...
You know, every time I see a clip like that, I'm reminded of the startling, disturbing fact that so much of this country truly believes that every single case being brought against Trump is a part of some grand scheme to take him down. They believe that it's more likely that dozens of prosecutors and jurors and judges and the evidence being brought forward and the legal analysts saying these cases are strong and the former Trump administration officials saying they saw the things, he did the things, and should be held accountable for the things, the Trump lawyers pleading guilty, and on it goes. All of that is a part of this grand plot to stop Trump. That's more likely in their mind than Trump, one guy, not hundreds in a conspiracy. One guy did some things wrong and is now being held accountable for it. Before getting to another clip from this press conference, I once posed that very thought experiment to a Trump supporter at a rally, but it didn't budge him much. I need you to admit, it's not crazy to go, it's probably more likely that there's not the largest conspiracy in the history, and you don't even listen to my sentences. Come on. In the history of the world, where every single judge, every single grand jury juror, every single prosecutor, every single person involved, every witness who's testified against Trump or who's going to and has already been interviewed and all the stuff we're learning, all of that's fabricated. Or the one guy who has every interest in the world in lying to protect himself is the one guy lying. That's a lot simpler.
Here. Let's go back to the 2020 election. And I saw this. Now, Milwaukee, they actually came up with more votes than the entire population of these pre-voting districts.
You need to check where your information.
Because you've been brainwashed with this hatred.
I'm just full of love. Yeah, and that's just factually incorrect what he ended with. But he wasn't too interested in what I had to say, obviously. And yeah, it makes sense. The grand conspiracy with the hundreds of people, all part of this thing, and fabricating really convincing evidence and all of it. And a lot of things that we saw out in public from Trump. Nah. And this is the dangerous thing about the messaging from Trump. Once you can convince your base that in every situation where Trump is accused of something, held accountable for something, whatever it is, he's the victim, then every extra horrible thing that we learn about Trump is just further proof that they're framing him or he's just being victimized in a new way. So he's, for example, determined to be a civilly liable rapist. No, that means he's once again being wronged somehow by that case. He's indicted for trying to block the peaceful transfer of power. He's the one being wronged. Pretty maddening. A movement, as I've been saying, defining itself by the victimhood of one man. Pretty sad and pitiful. Here's Trump saying at the same press conference that presidential immunity meaning being completely shielded from criminal liability for any actions taken as president, is the most important thing for a president to have.
Well, I can say presidential immunity, which we'll be talking about because that will be upcoming, is very, very important for a president to have. If a president doesn't have immunity, he really doesn't have a presidency. He can be told to do things that he would never do. He can do really bad things for our country. Presidential immunity is imperative. It's going to be very, very important. And I'd rather talk about that next week. But there is nothing more important to a presidency than immunity, because they have to be free to make decisions without saying, oh, if I do this or if I do that, as soon as I get out of office, we're going to be indicted. We're going to have trouble. And the other party will do that. I think we've seen that. They've done that. There's some very bad people.
So the appeals court ruled against him on that claim. He's going to try to get it up to the Supreme Court, and we'll see if they agree to take it up. But it's an absurd argument. We heard Trump's lawyers in court arguing that if Trump ordered the assassination of, or if any president ordered the assassination of their political opponent by Navy SEALs, but weren't impeached and convicted for it, they wouldn't be able to be criminally prosecuted. So just flat out saying the president should be above the law, even as a former president, for things they did while they were president. And I've seen people make this point far and wide, but that means Trump is saying Biden could refuse to leave office no matter what happens in the election, or assassinate Trump or something crazy, and wouldn't be able to be criminally prosecuted, held accountable under the law for it if he weren't impeached and convicted. Truly insane. Make sure you are subscribed to the YouTube channel. You can become a member at lukebeasleyshow.com/membership, and podcast listeners rate and review wherever you listen.